of my questions are about the inception, going back to the early days. But at one point, Deborah Wyatt was serving as our lawyer as she was working with landowners. Do you recall that?
Deborah Wyatt working as a lawyer, is that what you said? Okay.
As our lawyer.
Yeah, I recall that.
Did it work well? And how did, and I can't bring back how we did that.
What I recall is that I recall that she served for Friends of Nelson. She was just kind of, because she is a lawyer, as a person that we could ask legal advice from and to get her interpretation of legal issues. I don't recall, which she offered, as her opinion. I don't recall her working with landowners specifically, except perhaps like landowners, maybe many of the issues, remember, in the early days were all about the surveys and access to people's properties, right? Mm-hmm. And so as I recall, I think Deborah did her best to try to answer legalities around that, kind of through FON. I don't recall that she had, specific relationships with landowners. Yeah. But it was certainly good to have a lawyer on the board who we could ask questions to. That's what I recall.
I think it's good we have a lawyer for our board.
Mm.
And she did, the notes that I found, or the minutes, seemed to indicate she was working with the property owners. That's what I was interested in.
Yeah, sorry.
How do you think it could have worked better with lawyers? Have you?
With lawyers?
Yeah, like what if we had hired a lawyer to work with landowners, and they signed up, all the landowners, or the ones that wanted to participate as clients, but they did it as a group, so they could have a committee that came up with all the questions they wanted the lawyer to address, and the lawyer could pick out the one that had the most interest, and then meet with the group. So I'm looking at the cost of lawyering and the cost of getting advice to people, and then they could have advised them on hiring their own eminent domain lawyer, or should they do it as a group? They could discuss that.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea in terms of pooling resources and hiring a lawyer to be only an advocate for the landowners versus the messiness that comes in with the eminent domain attorneys. And there were a lot of questions in it, so it would have been really helpful. I think that it would have been really helpful to have someone like that. At the same time, I feel that it would be important to not, for like FON or a similar group, it would be important to not cede too much authority to the lawyer, or to say to the landowners, just talk to him. And I'm saying a lawyer has important advice and interpretation, obviously. However, that advice and interpretation is different from strategy and plans and organization that a community group can offer, I think. And I thought about it, what I really wanted to say today, and this relates to that. So can I say it now?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it relates to the whole legal issues too. So I think that is okay. I think it's really important. Taking a small step back, right around the time that all this started, I read a book by Malcolm Gladwell called David and Goliath or something. And I might have chosen to read that book because this was happening, but I can't remember. And, that book was all about how David defeats Goliath, right? How the little guy can get the better of the big guy. And it was basically the theme or the message was completely do things that are unexpected. you can't play the game that the big guy has set out. If you play that game, you're gonna lose because, you know, they control everything and they have so much more power and resources. So what you have to do when you're the little guy is not follow the program, okay? And this is why I feel a little bit about lawyers or about any authority figure. Someone who says, this is the way it is, because they are people trained and maybe have to follow regulations and rules as part of their profession. They have to follow the line, you know, because they're professionals, and that's what, when you hire a professional, that's what they're going to do. But a community group has a little more leeway to think differently. And where I'm going with this is the surveys. So there were all kinds of legal questions in the beginning about, oh, well, do they really have the right to come on our property based on that law that I can't remember that the General Assembly passed that we tried to get changed eventually? You know, do we have the right to say, no, you can't come on my private property to survey? And I feel like it was so powerful and so important at that junction to take the tactic that it does not matter whether they have the right or not legally, because the way the powerful play it is that there are many examples of laws that exist that are supposed to protect people, for example, or the environment, and large corporations break the law, and that doesn't matter. It only matters if the people or somebody representing the environment can pull together the legal resources to sue them, to make them follow the law. Otherwise, nothing happens. That's what happens. And that's how they do it. And like in bigger cases, like there's all kinds of illegalities all the time, and you have to have like an attorney general or a state attorney general to defend the public, to say these people are breaking the law, and to bring a case. If you don't have someone to bring a case, nothing happens. And that is like, you know, and then the corporations, they play that game because it doesn't even matter to them if they lose after they violated your rights. They just have to pay a fine. And so they put that into their calculations. So what I'm saying is that people can also do that. And I feel like that's what we did, because we were like, okay, you're saying you do have a right by law to be on our properties. Well, we're saying you have to prove it. You have to take us to court and sue us to demonstrate that the law is on your side. And I'm not sure that a lawyer would have come up with that, you know, not at all. Or a lawyer might have said, well, this is what the law says. I mean, that's usually what lawyers do. They say, this is what the law says, you know? But yeah, so I really wanted to say that.
That's good.
Actually, it was a very effective approach. Do you think it achieved it? Well, what do you think we achieved by refusing the survey?
Oh, I think that was such an effective approach. I really do. And denying the survey served as a rallying cry. It pulled people together. That was one thing it did. It gave us media attention and attention in general. The second thing it did. It caused wonderful delays that are very useful in general. Really long delays, so that was really great. There's another thing. It was the only means available, still the only one that I'm aware of making, that I was ever able to really see. It was the only means available for a landowner to really be clear that they opposed the project on their property. And I feel like that is so important because of the narrative of, oh, we are the pipeline company and we work with landowners, and landowners are happy to work with us. We offer them money, they take the money, and that is all good. So that's the narrative, and the landowner can't get in there. I don't want your money. and saying no to the survey says, I don't care how much money you offer me, I am not interested in this deal. And I felt like that was really, really powerful.
I agree.
Yeah, and thank you, Ron, for your incredible work on that end. It is not forgotten. We could not have done it without that door-to-door knocking.
Another question is back in when we first started, it was a powder keg. There was so much to be done at the same time by just a few people that there was no way that we could do everything fast enough. And it was very difficult, I think, emotionally, physically, mentally, the stress. What if we had organized slower? So if we focused more on identifying everybody and getting them involved and getting people doing volunteer tasks before we actually formed the corporation, would we have been more together? It's like a lot of the programming techniques today are saying get your users involved as you write the program. It's that concept.
Well, I mean, I think there's trade-offs. So on the one hand, the reason we felt so busy and stressed and everything was because we felt like, we were in a race against the Dominion, right? And we wanted, of course, to do everything we could. And so that, the pressure came from there. But also, I think that, yes, a small group of people is overloaded and has too much to do. And that also increases, obviously, the pressure and stress. But there's a balance, and it's difficult because the more people you pull in, the more opinions you have about what you should do, and the more you have to negotiate with all the people, and the slower you're going to move, like way slower that way. And that could be too slow, I think. So, but it's not like one or the other, right? There can be a balance. But I think that, it's a classic problem with when nonprofit organizations form, right? It's like the first one practically, if you read about it, that you'll see, which is how many people should be on the board of directors and how should we choose board of director members? And then they'll talk about the issue of, well, you want to have people you can trust, that you can work with, that you can make decisions with, but you want to have enough people to get stuff done, So, because you can't do everything yourself, right? Yeah. I mean, the good part was in the beginning, we were very clear about the mission. That makes it a lot easier in terms of when we're trying to stop that pipeline, So there wasn't we didn't need to hear a lot of opinions about that, right? What should we be doing here? Yeah.
Thank you.
In the early days, and probably most of the way through, Dominion tried to present this pipeline as a done deal. How do you counter that? Because if we're trying to address this to other organizations, or other communities that might be in the same pickle we were in.
Yeah.
How do you handle that done deal?
Well, I think that's one of many talking points that is classic in this type of infrastructure project that the other side always brings forth. And it's good. How do you counter that? One way to counter it is just to be aware. This is a classic talking point. And so, you have to tell your people, the people that you're trying to get engaged and work with you, yeah, they say this, they always say this, and they're trying to disempower you. And so as long as somebody knows that, you can help let other people know. And that's helpful, I think.
It's, you know, we interviewed a couple of weeks ago, Hemi and Stan Ola, who eventually signed an easement. And one of the reasons they did was because Hemi had worked for 40 years for Ralph Turpin, a lawyer. And he said, it's gonna happen.
Right.
So you might as well get the best deal for yourself you can.
Yeah, isn't that something?
Yeah. Now, as it turned out, they they negotiated an easement that was more favorable to them, but it also had repercussions downstream from them.
Interesting.
Which turned out to be more beneficial for the people below them than if it had continued in the original route that had been planned. So, you know, but still, as soon as somebody calls up a lawyer, I think this is what you were saying before.
Yeah.
They're gonna say, let's get you the best deal possible.
Right, I mean, it's conventional wisdom. As a fighter and the little guy, you don't always want to use conventional wisdom, you know? But, you know, people who, that aspect of it's a done deal, I am very sympathetic, really, to any landowner who feared that they could be left in the dust if they waited too long, and because the whole situation is so bad, you know. But I felt like in the beginning, I felt like I could say, and I think I did say to lots of people, you know, that I get that, but we're not there yet. You have plenty of time before they're gonna really make your situation a lot worse if it goes that way. We have time right now, and we did have time back then, for sure. As it got closer and closer and time went on, that case would have been much harder to make, I have to admit. It takes a lot of, it takes a lot of bravery. Be like, yeah.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about finances, because I was not part of Friends of Nelson. I was working with people who eventually became part of Friends of Nelson on Davis Creek matters and things like that. How does an organization, what decisions does an organization have to make regarding finances of what the organization wants to do?
Well, do you mean, I mean,
501c3 versus going with Virginia organizing, that kind of thing.
okay,
Start a fundraising campaign.
you're asking how does an organization make those decisions?
Well, what did you go through?
To make those decisions? Yeah. Well, I remember, I remember just talking about it as a board and talking about pros and cons. And Ernie had a lot of, he had by far the most experience as a nonprofit person because he has Wild Virginia, which he started. And he had experience, and so did I actually, working with Virginia organizing also. So I remember it was part of wanting to hit the ground running. When you get a fiscal sponsor like we did, you don't have to, you can hit the ground running a lot sooner. And I think that was a big motivation for that. Also for us, FON, we didn't have any clear reason that we needed to get our own 501c3 status. I never heard any compelling reasons to do that. A compelling reason would be that you are not able to find a fiscal sponsor that will work with you as easily as Virginia Organizing did. And they pretty much stopped taking on people like FON later because they were overwhelmed. And not every organization can find that. So that would be a reason. And Virginia Organizing didn't have, sometimes fiscal sponsors have all these regulations and rules. They make it difficult for the small group. But Virginia Organizing wasn't like that. So I think they're pretty easy to work with.
So was part of the early messaging to the public, we need money?
Yeah, totally. I think so, yes. That is always important messaging. Yes, I definitely had that in my mind. I know how to raise money, how to get the public engaged. And that was why we had the members, was about having members is important for several reasons. One is to get the public, feeling like more like they have a stake. It's about messaging, anyone can be part of this. It's also to raise money, but yeah, the money that you get from your members isn't really that much, but it's related to raising money, because if you do try to get a grant, you need to show that you have done all this other stuff to raise money. And a major thing is we have members, that shows that we have community support. So grantors like to know that you have community support. So you want to be able to say, 500 people are members. People care enough to give us $25. That's an important thing. So that's a reason to have members, as well as to collect. Also to have it helps you gain a database that you can send out all kinds of messages to, right? About actions and also about further fundraising. Yeah, so.
So when you were president, you must have been conscious of the fact that you wanted to involve as many people, as much of the public as you could.
Yeah, definitely.
So what were the most effective things that you think you all did in those days to get the public's attention?
Okay, well, one thing that comes to mind, that was another thing I really wanted to make sure to bring up, is working with the media. And I feel like if other communities are fighting infrastructure projects, that it's so important to have people, it's so helpful to have your group have media spokespeople who are personally impacted. And that is way more powerful in getting people to care than people who are not personally impacted. So idealism is all very well and good, like about, taking care of the environment and stuff, but it just is not the same as, I personally, this is my life, I don't want this, and this is what they're doing to me. You can't beat that. So yeah, that was an important kind of messaging. But let's see, gosh, we had rallies, we had quite a few rallies in different public locations. I remember several at the downtown mall in Charlottesville. We even though that's not Nelson, obviously we were trying to make it broader than just here, so that's kind of that attracts the larger community. We had rallies, and at the rallies we had people speak and give, talk about the different reasons, that we were opposed to this project. And so and then those things, you have to do that to get the media attention. The media did generally come and cover that. That would get on TV, and that was good. And yeah, so we did that. We did also at, in Richmond, we did rallies there, and we went to, we lobbied in Richmond when the General Assembly was in session. That was when we had at least 2, I remember, rallies there. What else did we do? It's like, I'm sure there was other things. The market, yes, at the farmer's market, a table there. We were always talking about in those early days, and something that, theoretically, I wish we had done more of, is like more stuff like the market. Like the market, everybody said was, and I totally believe it, was so important and helpful, and really, it was people speaking one-on-one to their, neighbors and friends. And, the in-person stuff, but more of that would have been really good, but we had a hard time because it's so labor intensive.
When
but
you say point people to people who were actually impacted, were there specific people that you can think of now that you thought would be good spokespeople for how this was impacting, the pipeline would have impacted them?
Well, any landowner is what you want. Any landowner. Yeah. For a long time, I was the spokesperson and would talk to the media as a landowner. And I remember when I stopped doing that, I just hated seeing other people who were stepping up to fill the plate, which was really important and critical. But I was like, oh, if only more landowners. Yeah. I mean, those people, it's totally, anybody is better than nobody. Anybody. Yeah. But I was always disappointed in the number of landowners, and myself too. I did not enjoy speaking to the media. I always was disappointed that more landowners weren't willing to get on camera and say, this sucks. Because, yeah, I was always disappointed about that.
Well, having been in the field of trying to get people to talk on camera.
I know. I know.
We really targeted landowners for membership and outreach. But I don't remember us really targeting the adjoining property owners. But as the years went on, they were affected more and more with access roads, with traffic, with the blast zone, the dangers, worried about the water.
Mm-hmm.
They would be looking at it if it came through. So it was affecting a lot more people. And if you look at the total landowners along that route, there were 2 or 3 or 4 times more of those, but we didn't really direct anything to that group specifically.
To the adjoiners, yeah. That's an important group. I think that's wise to think about. If you can go through and actually get, first we had our list of landowners, which was most important, but then making a list of the adjoining landowners is I agree, that would be an important step. I think we did try to reach out to the community as a whole, like at the farmers market and with communications, like when another thing we did was we put an ad in we put several ads. We made nice ads in the paper. They weren't ads, they were like messages, these are all the problems with the pipeline. And we would talk about problems that affected other people, not just the landowners, right? And that was supposed to, that was ideally to bring more people in, right? But yeah. Another thing we did about getting the message out, well, no, it's not really about getting the message out. I was just thinking another good thing, speaking of reaching out to people and lists of landowners, was how we connected with, all the other landowners in other counties. Yeah, of course, that was super important. Sorry.
Telephones, the email, can you go back in your memory of how it felt with the email, the quantity, just the email traffic, how it was handled? Can you go back and come up with any things that maybe we could have done better, or lessons learned about that? I just remember one that was red bolded.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember at least twice it coming up at a board meeting that we were following really terrible as a group. We were following terrible email etiquette. So the only thing I would suggest to other groups is to, at the get-go and then periodically, to bring up email etiquette. What else can you do? The etiquette was things like, if you have a new subject, you should you should start a new thread with the new subject. You shouldn't go on and on and on and on and on, replying all. You should not reply all at all unless you need to speak to everybody, that kind of thing. That was the kind of problem. And endless threads, you didn't know, yeah. But, that's how it goes a lot of times.
What about Facebook? Did you?
What about Facebook?
Did you have Facebook?
We did have Facebook way in the beginning, yep. And that was an important outreach tool, I felt.
Just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah.
Well, you came in sort of the middle, towards the end of the six-year
Right.
struggle, right?
Not as president.
Not as president.
I came in 2015 as a
So you were there
rookie.
pretty close to the beginning.
Yeah, well, it took me a long time to get my head around what was going on. This was very new, and the group was just charging down the road, so I was just hanging on the best I could. It took me a year anyway, more, to sort of get with a swing. And you're chasing me out and making me go talk to all those businesses was one of the best ways to get off of the old professor's role into something different and open things up. And then I got involved with the tabling, helping Randy, and then took it over from Randy. So I just got deeper and deeper into it as we went.
And when it came time for somebody to take up the reins, when Helen decided she couldn't do it anymore, tell me about what was going through your mind in terms of the organization that,
I thought the organization was great. I just didn't think that I was the one to lead it. So I dodged that for quite a while. But I'm really glad I wound up by saying yes and doing it, because it gave me a whole different perspective on things. And I think we're now in a position of making that transition into something else, a new mission, which is tricky because the old mission was so crystal clear, and it had a lot of support in the community. Now we're trying to figure out something new that serves the county, and it'll involve at least rethinking, if not rewriting, the mission statement, and then coming up with projects that serve the county and aren't being done by other groups or aren't being done well by other groups. Plus, we've got half the size, the board is now half the size that it was before, and a lot of new members. And they are, many of them are young, raising families, working full-time jobs, that sort of thing. So, they only have so much time. So this is an interesting transition period.
it was useful to have an enemy that was clear
Mhm.
cut
Yep.
in the early days. It's
Yeah.
harder when you don't have that focal point.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But
I didn't mean to butt in and
Oh, no,
cut short Joanna's stuff, because this is great.
no, no.
yeah, I'm trying to think. If
Well, I got another one to explore. The eminent domain versus environmental issues. Can you share anything, any thoughts on this? Or?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, there's nothing more powerful than people who are directly impacted saying, this is not okay. And I think that that's the case in every kind of issue, every kind of issue. The best people to fight for justice of any type is the people directly impacted. And so in that way, for sure, the eminent domain issue is really important because those were the people directly impacted. Now, of course, the property owners also had, environmental concerns about their property, which is also very important. But I thought you were speaking more to the difference between environmentalists fighting the project who weren't directly impacted. Yeah. Another thing, I think it's the only other thing I really wanted to say for future people, is that I think another important thing, to be clear, as a group or a leader who is trying to organize, it, it's important to be clear yourself and then to share with your inner circle and have it grow. It's important to be clear that one of their narratives is it's a done deal. Okay, you expect that. There are other narratives. A major one is the NIMBY thing. So, these selfish people are fighting the pipeline because they just want to push it off onto somebody else. And that is a narrative that's used, unfortunately, by many people, not just like a pipeline company, but it's, I feel, definitely completely designed and propagated in order to pull the rug out of the most powerful people, the property owners, by making them ashamed of themselves and doubting their motivations. And so when you're aware at the get-go of that narrative, then it can help you not fall for it, and to recognize that people are just saying that because they're repeating it. That happens a lot, and without a lot of thought, without a lot of depth, or they're saying it because they're trying to disempower your movement, and don't fall for it. Yeah, so don't fall for it, because I think that there's no conflict between caring deeply for your own property. You are not saying, there are people who could be saying, but I certainly wasn't saying it, and I didn't feel anyone in our group was ever saying it. We just don't want it on us. Go put it over there. No. We never felt that way, and I don't believe most people would ever feel that way, because when you are impacted by such a thing, you don't want to hurt other people in that way. You're the one who knows exactly how bad it is. It's just a total line. But anyway, there's no conflict, because you know that you are unfortunately the best person to fight this thing. And then you have to have some faith that when it gets moved, those people need to recognize that they are the best people to fight that thing. And it just takes some faith, not just in you, but in the other people, that if it does get pushed off you, and goes somewhere else, because there is a right person to fight it, and that's the person whose property it's on. It sucks. That's how it goes. But on that theme, there's another part of that, on the narrative theme, that I put in my mind together, which is that there's other narratives that also disempower property owners. So this is kind of about the environmental versus eminent domain kind of ideological fronts. Some people, they feel there's a narrative that, as you must know, that property owners, it's not just NIMBY. They don't have the right to speak for their property, because they are not, it's not even their property. It's the Monacan Nation's property. We are all settler colonizers, and private property is a sham. So those people who are coming from the kind of the opposite end, so I totally got this. I heard this from people, and it was hard, and their attitude is, you guys shouldn't be speaking up. The Monacan Nation should be speaking up. And when you talk about yourself and advocate for your rights as a property owner, you are cementing the system of private property ownership that disenfranchises all of us. That's how they felt about it. So you can't speak up as a property owner because you're being a capitalist and taking away from all the other people, And they also want not only the Monacan Nation to be speaking up, but this new thing really of super woke culture, but that the most disempowered people are the only ones who are allowed to speak, and you have to always be pushing them forward. So, you know, the top of the who you never let speak is the white man, right? And then white woman, and then we go down from there, and the lowest on the social totem pole is the one who needs to be out front, out forward. And so that's a really strong belief people have. And what that does too, so that's more like what's coming at you from the left as a property owner trying to fight infrastructure, and they want you to shut up and sit down, you know, because they feel like, yeah, you're just being part of the whole system that way. So I think that is also a narrative that you need to see and be like, hell no. Yeah, basically, that's my opinion.
I remember that there was some conflict between those that wanted to focus on property rights and those that wanted to get into the environmental issues and the uses of the gas. But as it turned out, I don't think we won anything on property rights. All the victories that we got in the courts were environmental issues.
That is very true. That is an excellent point. However, I would rejoinder with that the only reason we were able to get all those victories in the courts was because we delayed.
Yes.
And without that, it never would have happened. And we delayed by all that property owner stuff.
Yeah, that was the survey.
Yeah, yeah, and
Good point. Good point.
the noise, you know, gathering support, you know, because the law stuff took a long time, and that project would have been done by then if we hadn't the property owners were the opposition started, you know, and only when it's just I feel like the strong environmental support came in like years later when you know, the Sierra Club was with us to begin with, but then but Selk was like creepingly slow in their help, right? And at the end, after I was gone, I would of course read the news, and then I would see all these big organizations like NRDC, really impressive, would get in big articles, and the Atlantic Coast Pipeline would be mentioned, and I was like, where were these guys when it mattered? You know, I mean, it mattered at the end too, but the major press and stuff was way late. But if those people got in at the beginning, I feel like the whole thing would be over way quicker, but they don't. And the whole thing over quicker on defeating the pipeline is what I mean. But they don't come in and to really get that kind of message out. So I feel like the property owner opposition was really key.
The organization financed two studies, an economic study and a steep slope study. Was that during your tenure?
The economic study definitely was. Yeah, I think I was aware of the steep slope stuff, but I was definitely fading out. And yeah.
Well, setting aside the fact that steep slopes might be too particular to Nelson County to help another community, it's flatter. How important do you think that economic study was? What did it achieve?
Well, what it achieved is, again, it was just another thing. I feel like we tried to do everything we could. And it was another thing that helped us get the word out, because it was another thing that we could do a press release on, and that we could talk to the media about, and that we could say, these are facts about how this will hurt our county. And look, these are actual facts that come from a study, you know. And so it was like that. And those, we used the study for in the regulatory process, you know, it was one of those things we pulled out facts from and filed with FERC, I guess. Yeah, FERC. And so that's what we used it for. You know, I have no idea if it was really important in the end. I mean, honestly, what is it that made us win? I think I agree with Ron that it was the legal environmental challenges But I think and I think, but I don't think that would have sunk it on its own. I think what sunk it, those things were really, really fabulous and fantastic, but it was the delay. It was the delay. I think the Dominion gave up because their economic factors changed. It was no longer in their favor because of the time period. So they're like, it's not worth it now. That's what I always hoped from the very beginning.
And of course, they're gonna, their analysis of it was that we were a well-funded group of environmentalists who, well, never mind.
So
Didn't care about jobs,
Right.
that's such
energy
nonsense.
independence and all that.
And we're making it more difficult for Americans to have the energy that they need,
Right,
so.
right, right.
Things like that, the economic study and the steep slope study, which I've got to believe is more particular to Nelson County than it might be to, say, Buckingham County or, you were on the board when those were commissioned, right?
Mhm.
So was the hope that the steep slope study would wake people up?
Yeah, I think so. To show that, they were really playing with fire basically because of the erosion history of this whole area. And it is the most erosion prone place in the country. And it woke me up. Wasn't aware of all that. Of course, I hadn't been here in the aftermath of Camille when so much of it really manifested itself. But I think it made a big impact on me. How much did it change the whole thing? I can't say.
One of the points that Susan McSwain made when we interviewed her, and I don't think she was the only one, Peter Agelasto said this also. The more you know about the history and the geography of your county, of your location, the more effective your argument can be.
Mhm.
You agree with that?
Oh, I do. Yeah, knowledge is power.
Because Peter's thing was, of course, was the Rockfish Valley,
Mhm.
South Rockfish Valley, and its foundation.
I wonder if the Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energy, getting that woman who came and talked to us, forgotten her name now, laying out a real scientific basis for the steep slopes, way beyond anecdote or something, memories of Camille. That was pretty impressive. And I wonder if our bringing it up as a potential issue was what activated DMME to get involved and put some real weight behind it.
Yeah. And I don't know, it just seems to me that the general point, if we're talking to other communities, is the more expertise you can bring
Right.
to bear, the better off we are.
I agree with that, and also about that, I think that's pretty wise about knowing about your county, is that we also did that with we told landowners, with FERC, we wanted people to know everything about their property. And so that's kind of similar, like to do their own assessment of potential artifacts and environmental things, and to really report everything about their property in terms of this is what's valuable about it, just so that's kind of a similar idea.
I want to ask you something about relationship with the local government, if any. What happened in the early days of Friends of Nelson? What we've heard from some people is the Board of Supervisors didn't know any more than anybody else. They knew very little. They had not really known ahead of time that it was happening. And then when it was announced, it came as something of a surprise, and they didn't know how to respond. as it turned out over time, became an impossible thing for a candidate for the Board of Supervisors to ignore. So going back to the early days, were there efforts to talk to the Board of Supervisors, and if so, what did you all say to them?
There were definitely efforts to talk to the Board of Supervisors. I know we had, we did successfully get multiple resolutions passed. Honestly, I can't remember what they all were. There was something was some general statement of opposition of some type at least, but there was more than one resolution that was passed. So one thing we would say to them was whatever the heck we were trying to get them to pass and why they should pass it. I remember going to the county building and trying to talk to them. And it didn't really, I was trying to talk to one in particular, and it didn't really go very well, but unfortunately I can't even remember what I was planning on saying to him. I think it was, I think it was basically why the Board of Supervisors should oppose this as a government body, just the reasons.
And this kind of leaks over to when Doug's tenure as president, the work that Vicki Wheaton did on floodplain. Could you talk about that a little, and why that was important?
Well, it's something that really was a different angle, and it involved the county very directly. I don't know in detail, maybe Ron could fill in here, but what Vicki did, but she was incredibly persistent and got that thing through. I don't know whether it made a difference in fact, but at least it was symbolic of a county actually starting to care about things like watershed management and so on. So I think it was a beneficial effort, but I don't think it had a direct impact on Dominion's decision to pull a plug.
Ernie believes that it was the last line of defense, that legal defense, that we would have pulled out of our pockets had it progressed further than it did, to appeal the court decision that.
Well, it could have been just, there's one more potential legal hurdle among all the others they're facing that tipped them over the edge or helped tip them over the edge. I think there are a whole lot of things that went into their decision to pull the plug. I mean, my own thing, and I don't know whether anybody else will agree, was that back when the Virginia Clean Economy Act was passed, by that time I think Dominion was already in the process of making the decision to pull the plug. And they got a great deal, according to Tom Hadwin, on the offshore wind thing. And he was very concerned about how well financially Dominion was going to come out on that. But I think they saw, we're getting to a point, we've got 36 miles of this thing in the ground. We got everybody in the world mad at us. We're all hung up with SELC and others suing us under the Administrative Procedures Act. You got, at the same time, you got things like Moody's and other investment guidance people saying, this whole thing is natural gas is not good. The stuff that Inside Climate News broke about the far more hazardous damage caused by methane as opposed to carbon dioxide in the first early years. All of that started accumulating, I think, and they could see the handwriting on the wall, and they weren't far enough along to do what Mountain Valley is doing, and that's just slam it through, damn the torpedoes, we're going in. So I think, there was a lot of luck involved. In fact, the luck that they got this plan off the ground fairly late in the fracking revolution, right? It wasn't early. Then when they got it, they did a crummy job of planning it. I mean, literally, a couple of people without much in the way of credentials came in, looked at their computers or something, and came up within a couple of weeks saying this is the route. So they were just into a lot of procedural things. And I think that's why part of the reason SELC in particular laid back, because their thing is environmental. And they were watching for all the places where they were coming along in the regulatory process. And they could nail them with the Administrative Procedures Act violations. And that was the real clincher, I think, in terms of SELC's contribution and a large part of the reason Dominion gave up. That's just my opinion.
Doug Horner was arguing early in this that Dominion should, their stockholders should be pressured at meetings and things like that.
I've got his paper in the file under essential papers, and it was very early, and he was spot on.
I think someone did go to Dominion meetings and bring up different things.
I think he did.
remember, maybe he did as a stockholder.
He had a $1 or
Okay.
one share or something like that thing, and was able to get
It
up
was
and.
more than him, though. I think there were some other people.
Yeah, I think you're
I
right.
think there was.
Who responded to that, because once Doug kind of published that idea, or the idea got out, some people took notice of it and decided that they would go to stockholder meetings too. And I know I even thought I'd buy some stock just to be a thorn in their side. I never did, but it
Yeah.
made me think about where the pressure should come from. So I think what you were saying was that there were a lot of different factors that were weighing on Dominion's
I think so.
decision-making.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think you characterized it very well. And I think that's why, like, when you ask, like, was this important, was that important, like the economic study or the steep slope study, or this tactic or that tactic, it's really hard to know, because we really just tried, I feel like, to do everything we could, because we didn't know what would work. And there was no way to tell. I mean, some of it does take luck, you know, so we just tried to do everything that seemed like a good idea, you know, I think.
There was a theory, and the best exemplar of this, I think, would be all pain, no gain of Wintergreen, is that putting pressure on politicians and trying to make it a political issue that was the strategy, as opposed to the legal strategy or making a lot of noise about the environment or something like that. What's your reaction to?
I think I think it's a big room. There's room for many strategies, you know, and sometimes, you know, different kind of groups of people like to do different strategies. And sometimes it may even look like the different groups are doing different things. But I think it does work out well for people to be pursuing different niches, kind of opposition, you know. If the people are like into it, like if the all pain, no pain group, whatever, if they're like, this is what we want to do, well, okay then, you know. That's, because who knows? I think it takes it all. I think it was Nancy Sorrells who said her thing, she said it like over and over again, was we're just gonna throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks, something like that. That's this concept, yeah.
I think that's absolutely right. You just
Yeah.
pull out everything you can think of, and you know, try to the best of your ability to track what seems to be getting some traction, and try to follow that.
Yeah, I was always thinking in the early days, I was always thinking, what else can we do? What else can we get going? You know, what else might get us somewhere? And, you know, that's what, you know, Ron said, everyone was exhausted and stressed and too few people for too much work. Very true. And this is partly why. Right? But I mean, so there is what the limiting factor is, well, obviously any group can only do so much. And so you have to choose, well, what are the most important things? And that's a huge question that has to be, and I feel like we did do that as a group. We definitely did that, you know, prioritize to some extent.
Well,
Yeah.
some of it has to do, I think, with what the national, you know, the federal government and the current administration is prepared to respond to in some way.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, there's a difference there's probably gonna be a big difference between FERC under Trump and FERC under Biden, how long that lasts. I mean, so going the regulatory route and trying to put as much pressure on FERC as possible could be more fruitful than it certainly seemed to be.
It's theoretically conceivable.
Well, Dominion pulled the plug on it while Trump was still in office, did they not?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
So
actually,
if there was ever a more favorable environment for gas development, I can't imagine it than it was under Trump.
but I feel like Trump actually,
Yeah,
his administration helped
yeah, they
sink
pushed
the
it so
ACP
far.
because he got all these people in place, in like the Department of Forestry or whatever, that, yeah, they didn't follow the law. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah, exactly.
so that's really helpful.
Like the folks, the supervisor and the people up at the Monongahela National Forest, I think in particular was one of them. The staff on the ground had lots of objections to the
Right.
idea of the pipeline coming through. Lots of them, really worked them hard. And then the orders came down from on high, from the Secretary of Agriculture, down the line to the Chief of the Forest Service and so on, and all of it changed. People were moved, and that was all part of this business of, the abuse of regulatory rules, proper behavior. Just to reiterate something Joanna said earlier, the whole business of getting as many people involved at the local level was key to having Southern Environmental Law Center get engaged in this and stay engaged as strongly as they did. They have to make choices. Do we work on this or that or the other thing? But you had this energized group here. We had a community following, all kinds of publicity coming out in many different forums. They said, this one's worth betting some money on.
Yeah, I think that is so true. I really do.
For purposes of other communities learning from it, talk to us about the tabling that went on at the farmer's market. But, describe it and.
Okay. Every week, Saturday morning, from 8 till 12, we would have a tent, a canopy, with T-shirts for which we could receive donations. They were not for sale.
Right now.
And every week, when I was doing it, I would write up something that people could sign. There was information there about the pipeline. But largely, it was a kind of a one-on-one thing. You do enough of an attraction to get people over, and they get them in conversation. And other people come over, and so on. You get them to sign this petition that goes to, somebody in the legislature, or a letter to the governor, or whatever. Just to keep the pot boiling, sort of, and to get the feedback from the people as to what was on their minds. So, I would write these letters, and every week I would send off a packet of 30 to 50, depending on how hot the issue was. And made it simple for them. They just had to sign their name and give their zip code or something, whatever's minimally needed to make it legit. All right.
Thank you, I needed that because I don't want to just say tabling and assume that everybody knows what that means.
I'm sorry. We also tabled at events like Locken 1 year, and in the S-Festi, Heritage Harvest Festival up in Monticello, the Organic Food Festival, I've forgotten the name of it. So we were at all those events.
A couple of film festivals too.
Yeah, there was a bunch of that in the early days. I remember a lot of that. Just the people with, petitions to sign and
I
things.
gotta go out and see if Ben's wandering around.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was, I think, a very good thing. It sure as hell was good for me. I mean, I came late into Nelson County, and getting acquainted with people was just really helpful. And it gave me a chance, Somebody walks in and they're very well informed. They want to know what's the latest going on this particular legal case. Okay, you talk to them about that. Somebody else comes in and says, what's all this about? And so, you know, you get the full range of the sort of pulse of the county at that market, which I think is an invaluable outreach platform.